So today I want to show you guys how to make a pool cue out of some scrap walnut I had laying around. I started off using a hatchet to break up the small pieces into slivers, and this would give the slivers a random shape and pattern. I didn't want the really clean cut straight lines that were achieved off of a saw, so breaking them up like this is a great way to get a random pattern to it. I then filled the mold that I had made with the wood core in the center with the wood, and then used some Total Boat thick set epoxy and mixed in my colors. I was going to be doing this with a black oxen color from Black Diamond Pigments. So I mixed in the black into about 25 ounces of the deep set and then added in some gold glitter pretty much. And this would give a metallic flake look to the color, and I thought it would look really cool as well. The next color I was going to be using is a carbon gold, and this color pops. It is a really bright color, and it's a beautiful gold. It's not really a yellow or orange like some of them wind up being.
I love gold! Hence the name Goldmember.
With the epoxy all mixed up, I was able to start filling the mold. Now I wanted a two-color mix, so I started off with the gold on one end and filled it up about halfway. I didn't want to fill it up completely, as the gold would actually filter down or roll down into where I wanted more of the black color. So I started adding the black at the other end. And after just a little bit, about half of the mold being filled with these two colors, I then moved to actually pouring the colors together in the center to get a really nice blending and mix of the colors. I do want to mention that even though the colors come out really nice, in the end the black did overtake the gold just a hair, and I wound up with more black than what I had gold, which is okay because it gave it this really unique look. But it wasn't exactly what I was expecting. After the epoxy had completely hardened and cured, I moved on to cutting the blank to a rough cylinder with the router jig. This is one of the portions of the build where you finally get to see kind of what the cue is going to look like, where the colors wound up laying and how things are going to look. And as you can see, there's not as much gold, but this really cool wisp of gold running up one side. I now needed to install the pin. I was going to be doing a step drilling system, starting with a self-centering bit and then working my way up through the larger bits until the proper size had been achieved to tap out the hole for the joint pin. One thing to keep in mind while doing this process is that while using the bits, don't ever try to drill the full depth in one pass. Make shallow passes so that the debris on the bits can be removed, and also mark your depth on the final bit so you can put in the threads. When using the tap to cut in the threads, cut them by hand. Don't use the lathe speed. You need to be able to clear away the debris to properly cut the threads. To install the pin, I wrap masking tape around the exposed threads and then install the pin into the drill chuck, and then mix up some 5-minute epoxy, and this holds it great. It's a super strong bond. To actually install the pin, I apply a layer of the epoxy and then by hand rotate the cue blank to thread in the pin completely to the depth that is needed, and then allow the epoxy to completely harden. I usually allow the epoxy to cure for about 24 hours and then move on to cutting down the section around the pin that will be the joint collar. Now, one thing I've been asked before is about centering the pin. I do it this way because turning off of the center of the pin like this actually centers the pin on your turning. If I were doing this process on, say, a cue lathe or a metal lathe, I would be able to turn the taper of the cue in and then install the pin perfectly centered. You technically can do that this system and this way, but I find it much easier to actually use the pin itself as the turning center, because it pretty much guarantees that your cue is going to be cut and centered around your joint pin, which is the most important thing. As long as the joint pin is installed perfectly straight, you should have no problems. Once I've properly cut down the end of the cue to accept the joint collar, I then use the same process with the two-part epoxy to install the collar, and use a socket to add pressure and hold the collar into place before moving on to the router jig and starting to cut the taper. Your initial cuts on the router jig are by far the most important, as if you don't have the depth of the cut right, it will and can ruin the cue completely. I try to do many test shortcuts at the joint section to ensure that I'm going to have the proper diameter at the joint collar, leaving the joint collar just a hair larger than what I need so I can fine tune it by hand. But this router plane jig allows me to cut in the taper not only in a smoother pass with less vibration at the center of the cue, but also speeds up the process a good bit, as it takes hours and hours to do it by hand. I then can install the weight bolts and move on to sanding the cue up to about a 400 grit, and then I move on to doing the finish. I use CA glue for the finish and do multiple medium CA glue layers with Starbond adhesive CA, and then flush that by sanding it smooth before moving on to adding about 10 more layers of the thin CA and then polishing that to a really high shine. When you're sanding something like this, also remember to sand in small circular patterns. Even though the lathe is moving, you will leave horizontal striping if you just move the sandpaper down the length of the cue. So using the sandpaper in small circles helps to reduce that. I have found that using E-Ultra Shine Turner's wax is a great way to get a really high shine on these cues. And when doing the CA finish, I sand them up to about a 12,000 grit micro mesh level, so there's very few scratches. But this E-Ultra Shine wax and a shop cloth, once you apply heat, it actually polishes the surface of the cue and really brings out this high gloss shine. Now the only thing left is go install the bumper and have some fun. Alright guys, so I want to talk about this shaft for just a second real quick and give you some of the specs on it. This is the Meucci Pro Carbon. This one, particular one I guess I should say, is a 30 inch. They do offer it in a 29 and a 30. It has a 3/8 by 10 joint with a phenolic insert in the joint, as well as, I don't know if this is PVC or phenolic. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say this is a PVC ferrule though. It looks and feels like a PVC ferrule. Really helps with seeing your shot, seeing the end of the cue. It has a 15-inch pro taper. They guarantee it not to have any rise at 15 inches, so that helps a lot. and it shoots good. I've shot with it for a little bit in here now, and it has a little bit of a soft hit, but that's because, I think because of the medium tip. I'm used to my Q-Tech Synergy, which has a bit more of a crisp hit. But if you really like feeling the cue bite into the cue ball, this one does really nice. I believe these retail a little over 400 to 450. I cannot quite remember. This one is not mine. It was ordered by the gentleman who is getting this cue, and he ordered it. I didn't do any steps with it. It was just pretty much sent to me, but I like it a lot. I might look into getting a few more of these, and I think I'm going to start offering these with my cues. So that being said, I'm going to switch back to my Synergy and shoot a little bit and have some fun. I don't want to shoot crazy trick shots with someone else's shaft, so yeah, let's have some fun. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so you can see all the new videos coming out on the channel. There's a lot coming up. Also, go check out some of the other videos on the channel and check out jpaynewoodworking.com, where you can grab gear, read the articles, and show your support. I really appreciate it, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.